talking about what it means to be an established person, and it can really create like an unrealistic set of obstacles, I think. So I think it's important to talk about just like a marching order for what you're going to do.
Writers and crafters, I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 110 of the podcast. It's April 19th, 2023, as we record this. And our main topic today is marketing from the ground up, which is part 3 in our Marketing That You Own series. We don't have any new patrons this week, but thank you so much for our existing patrons for believing in us and in the podcast. It really makes a difference and helps us know that you're out there and you're listening and you think this has value. You can go to patreon.com/Valerie Isan, IHSAN, and for as low as $1 a month, you can get a postcard from me, a shout out on the podcast, and we can make announcements for you on the podcast. You can also go to patreon.com/Strange Air Stories for paranormal mysteries that Eric writes every month. And no announcements. Do you have announcements?
Nothing big, no.
Okay. Author update. I just got back from LA. It was a short trip. I'd never been, and we have friends there. Plus, there was a concert we really wanted to see, so we just used our miles and went Thursday through Monday. I really needed the sunshine and the rest, and it was a really nice vacation. So, and then today,
and this was really your first trip to LA ever?
It was, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I mean, I've been when I was like a teenager. I went to Anaheim. Right. We went to Disneyland, which is actually closer
not
than
LA.
I thought.
That's not LA. That's totally like going to New Jersey and say you've been to New York. That's not the same thing. That's not even. That's funny. LA is great. It gets such a bad reputation, being LA, and kind of gets this, flighty reputation. But then you get there and you think like, wait, what's wrong with, good weather, great Mexican food, like, lovely people.
And they have such an outdoor culture too, which was, like, our friend said we were going to go out to dinner and ice cream. And he's like, and they actually live in Woodland Hills. So we spent some time in he called it, suburbia, whatever. He's like, because it's suburbia, we're going to go to the mall for dinner. And I was thinking in my head, what a mall looks like over here.
Yeah, the Valley River Center. You have that in your head. That's not
so
what
I got there and I was like, oh, this is all outdoors. It really wasn't. Yeah. Or like we went to go, one of our friends, she had to work that day. And so she said, go to this place for breakfast. You'll really like it, but take a sweater. Because the first couple of days we were there, it was kind of chilly and overcast, which was still warmer than it was here, but
by a mile, I'm sure. Yeah.
And not raining. But anyway, so I went and I brought a sweater, and sure enough, like, you eat outside, there is no inside to this restaurant.
Right.
So that was fun, like, oh, totally different culture. And then the funniest thing was we were just gonna kind of like after breakfast, I don't know what we were planning on doing. It was our first full day there, and both of them had to work that morning. And so we didn't really have any plans, but we just wanted to relax and kind of, probably go back to their pool and just sit and read. But she texted us and said, there's this shoe store or this shoe sale that's happening in the parking lot of this church. It was like a pop-up sale. Wow. So and all the shoes were like $15. I don't know if it was a fundraiser or like just a trunk sale or something, but we went. I ended up buying 6 pairs of shoes.
Oh, goodness.
And I thought, how LA is that? Like, at breakfast and decide to randomly in the neighborhood stop at a church parking lot and buy shoes. So I felt like an LA girl. It was fun.
The last time I was in LA, I was there for a wedding, and on the morning of the wedding, we were at the beach and we were just hanging around, and somebody said, well, let's just go grab a beer and some snacks and before the wedding. And so we went to this bar on the beach that was, to me, like the most luxurious, like outdoor cabana style Mexican restaurant that was full of people it was like, this is the way people live down here. This is just an afternoon like kicking around, and it was amazing. I just couldn't get I was wide-eyed about the whole thing. Like it was so, I don't know, just laid back and taking it in. I don't know. I
But
think that's
also
great.
classy and glitzy at the same time. Like
Yeah, to
laid
an
back
Oregonian.
glitz. Like what?
Yeah. Yeah. All right,
Uh,
LA. You've got to pass. We'll keep you.
nice. Also, today is the new moon. And so I want to
Oh,
set an intention to grow something for the next 2 weeks. I try to do that. I haven't
all
spent any
right.
time thinking about it because I was in LA not thinking. But yeah, sometime today I want to like set an intention to grow something for the new moon.
Cool.
That's my author update.
What's my author update? So I yesterday I interviewed Valerie Brooks, Eugene author, for my um it started out just like we were going to do a cross marketing thing where we were going to talk to each other about our books, and then I was going to post it on YouTube, and then she was going to use it for her mailing list, and I was going to use it for mine. And about halfway through it, I thought, this is so much fun. I want to do this with like everybody, because we were talking and laughing, and she's such a different author than I am, but yet we had such a similar track on other things. I got halfway through it, like, am I doing it? Did I just start another podcast?
Oh my
Um,
God. I'm so
I
jealous.
maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but it was just such a fun thing to do. But on that podcast, the reason I bring it up, not to market it, the podcast that's not even started yet, but I I came to the realization that I'm actually kind of writing two books at the same time,
Oh.
and I have the book that I've been writing for a while, and then I tried to write a novella to fit in between the two books because I was getting impatient with feedback from my writers group, and now that has morphed into an entire other novel. And this is the dilemma that I live in. But as I was sharing with Valerie, it's actually been really good because it has forced me to track character development outside of my main character. You know, Melville
Mm-hmm.
has a girlfriend and a sidekick, and because I've planted these two trees and they have to grow sort of like, this tree, what happens in book one, the first of those two books has to, set up what happens in book two. What she knows here, sets up what she knows, learns later. It really has locked me into tracking all of that. Like, what are the what are the minor characters? Well, they're not minor characters. What are the sort of sub main characters
Supporting
doing?
actors.
Supporting actors. There we
Yeah.
go. What are they doing? And it's been really nice because now I've got this little graph going
Oh,
where it's
cool.
like, well,
Visual
Christy's learning
aid.
this and learning this and learning this, and then it's allowing me to create that trajectory that I've been. I don't know. Sometimes when I get into the story, I stop and think like, well, what does she know here, and what, because I'm so focused on what the main character is doing.
Mm-hmm.
I have to stop and remind myself that the all of the supporting characters are on a similar journey, parallel journey. And so yeah, it's been really good. So two books going at the same time. I'm kind of rewriting them both at the same time. Which
Because
is
of the supporting characters needing to flesh their stories out, or
Yeah, so I have them both. They're both in sort of like draft two form, and they're both coming together. The second one is further along, but I read them both and then sort of I read them both through the eyes of those supporting characters. Like, what is Christie's view of what's going on here? Is she ascending in trust, and is she ascending in her relationship with Melville, and the same thing with Sandoval? Like, I'm just, those are the two main
mm-hmm.
characters who have like real storylines of their own. And so as I looked at those, I mean, I spent last week just like writing scenes that supported their trajectory, and that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
Actually kind of went through last week and wrote like multiple scenes for each character for each book. So I was kind of
Mm.
just writing like their storyline over two books, which actually I think is going to work out a lot better. It'll tie the two books closer together.
And then are you
And
just gonna slip them into the current draft, like
I do that a
where they live?
lot.
Okay.
I do that a ton. I'll write the first draft at like whatever word count, and then I'll read it and say, "Whoop, scene here, scene here," and then I'll just write those scenes independent of I'll just write those scenes independently. So then my draft starts to look like, a series of chapters and then insert scenes down here. And as
Mm-hmm.
I'm rewriting top down, I'll pull and I'll
Okay.
pull and I'll
Mm-hmm.
pull. And there's always the finessing of like, I'll write this,
Transitions. Yeah.
yeah, the transitions and how it works in. But when I want to write the scene, I just have to write the scene. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I've been doing that. It's been really good. I would be lying if I didn't say like there's a million other stories that are cropping up in my head right now, and I'm trying to keep them down. In fact, my conversation with Valerie, I'm sitting there having this conversation, and I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to write that down."
Well,
I had
that's
to
what the
ask her.
Patreon is for.
Yeah, right. That's brimming over too. I like came up with 2 or 3 new stories for that. So yeah, it's a pretty fertile period right now. It's
That's
pretty,
awesome and exciting. What do you
yeah.
think is, I'm like totally digressing. Maybe this will be our topic, or maybe this will
We
segue into our topic. What do you think is at the root of this, like, fertility? Do you know, I mean, what in your life is creating this? Because, dude, I want to recreate this for me. What are you doing, like, physically, mentally, spiritually? What are you doing that is creating this place and
I
space?
I I don't know. I leave that up sometimes to the mysteries of, what's going on in the ether.
Mhm.
I will say that this is sort of a default position for my imagination. I do fill a lot of notebooks with stuff. I probably use 10% of it.
Okay.
Um, which makes me feel like I need to spend like I'm having long conversations with myself about when can I transition into just full-time authoring and not like, use the turn my author business, my ghostwriting business into a side hustle. Like how do I could devote more time to this and probably flourish, but it's another leap of faith. I don't know. I always have story ideas. There comes a period, I think what's the cycle that's different for me is that there are times when like I'll come up with short story after short story idea. That's the default. The really exciting time is when I feel the energy to write all of that,
Mhm.
and that's what it's been. And I don't know. I don't know. I wish I could replicate it. I wish I could sell it because then I would be a rich. Um, there was it how I said it or what I said that was funny. Because I would be rich if I could just bottle up like this like insanity that I go through. Like I'd sell it in little tinctures. You know what I would do? I'd give it away at writers' conferences.
There
I
you
would just
go.
give it away. I would just like love it. It's such a great feeling. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. I just think it's being open. I think if anything, it's just like thriving in it and knowing how much joy it provides. Like I just get hungry for the joy of it.
Mm.
It really it go to a coffee shop, sit down, and then there's this like pressure meets kind of like I've got 45 minutes. What can I come up with? And then boom, I get 60 minutes of ideas, and I just there's something that happens there.
That's awesome. Well, I think it sounds like you create a container for inspiration.
Yeah,
You have a space that you go that's outside of your home. You only use it for that purpose. You have a
yeah,
time limit,
yeah. There's a lot of that,
and then
and
that's what you're there for.
I think it's just like truthfully, like it's like a karate, like like a martial arts kind of discipline, like too. Like there's part of my brain that just says be on the alert for story, be ready, and I think, boy, it takes time. I didn't always have it, but when I'm walking my kid home from school, it's like I'm on the alert. If I'm not sitting here writing it, I'm looking for it, and so yeah.
Always be alert for story. That's cool.
They're walking. The stories are out there. That's the thing. Like they're out there. They're looking for you. You just have to, you know, be ready. Get your dream catcher out.
Hmm.
What are you reading? I'm
I am
curious. It's
reading
been
a book called The Music Shop by Rachel Joyce. It is,
I can picture the cover in my head, and I have never seen the book. So
it kind of reminds me of High Fidelity a little bit.
Oh,
in
different
that.
different book than I was picturing when you said it.
Okay, well, it's not that. I mean, he's a dude that owns a music shop in the 80s in some like rickety falling down building, and it's like a almost like a cul-de-sac, or like this little avenue of shops that are just really falling apart, and there's this developer that's trying to buy up all the land so they can raise it and, put in condos or something, I don't know. But he doesn't want to sell, and he's trying to keep everyone else from selling, but he is a loner guy, and his little trick, I don't know if it's a trick, but he finds music for people. So there's a like a little
Oh,
smidgen of magical realism, sort of like they'll come to him, and he just sort of like listens to them. He can kind of like sense, even if what they want to listen to is like Chopin, he'll be like, no, you need Aretha Franklin. Here, this album, this track, go home, read it. And he'll just like give it to them sometimes, because it's really important for them to listen to it, and it changes their life, So that's kind of who he is. But he is a loner, and maybe chapter 2 or 3, he meets a woman, and so it's kind of their relationship, and it's not even a relationship though. It's a very slow burn of a book. So I'm halfway through it, and not a lot has happened, but there's, lovely character development, and I know exactly where I am in the book, like in the
right,
story, I can totally be there, but the pacing is pretty slow. So I don't feel as, I'm really interested in it when I'm reading it, but it doesn't call to me when I'm not reading it. So it's
right.
taking
I
me
get
a
that.
little bit longer to read this book. But just before I went to LA, I finished reading it's called a Lemon Sugar Trilogy by Carolyn Finch. She's got a lot
Hmm,
of books, but this particular series is historical women's fiction. She's a Canadian author. So
interesting.
yeah,
I now I can see the cover of that. It's very pastel. It's
it is.
very.
Yeah.
When you said the music shop, honestly, I pictured like just some old town with like, something from the 30s with a bicycle outside, and there's like some basket of flowers, and then there's like a violin in the window. But then you took me to high fidelity,
Yeah, it's
different.
totally more high fidelity vibes.
That's more my music shop, where I
Yeah.
walk in and say, "Leave me alone for an hour, people. I'm gonna go spend a bunch of money that on records and things." I
Oh,
love
I
it. I might have
love
to
the
check it
way he
out.
talks about music though. It's just really mind-blowing. You might like the book just for that. Like if you could just go through and read those, because I know
I
you
love
love
people who are
music.
passionate about music. I mean, that is those are my people. I don't care what it is. Like there's a lot of music that I don't love, but if I find someone that's passionate about it, like I'll dig into it. I love it.
And he listens to everything, like classical and punk, and all of the things, that he just
Right.
has it all in his shop, and he only sells vinyl.
Oh
He's
man, stop.
refusing to go to the CDs, and so all of the uh what do they call them, the dudes that come to the store and provide music, the sales reps, that come
Oh,
in and
okay.
to sell
Yeah.
the, but they refuse to come to his store anymore because he doesn't want CDs, and they're like, you're not moving with the times. And
Oh boy, do they know that nobody buys CDs anymore? Do they
I
know that
know.
people buy vinyl and
This
download
was in the
music now?
80s, so
Okay. Oh, even better. My favorite era for everything is the
yeah,
80s. My gosh.
maybe this will be a book for you then.
I am gonna check it out. I will. Because I need something that's gonna get me charged up about music even more than I already am. Um, I
Hey,
I am still reading Hyperion.
okay.
I put it aside because I was interviewing Valerie and I wanted to read her book. So I read One Last Betrayal, her latest Angeline Porter book, which was a heck of a lot of fun.
Hmm.
It was so funny because she read my book and I read hers, and I was like, I read her book and I thought, boy, my book is like this slow burner. It's a gradually building mystery. Her book, it's like it hits the ground. It reminded me of like, that like the always the joke where someone's riding an exercise bike and then like it falls off and then they're just like going a million
Hmm.
miles an hour. Yeah, it was like that. Like the first chapter, it was just ripping through this like setting up of the mystery, and I was just riveted. I really couldn't put it down.
I
So
read her first 2 books in that trilogy, but I don't know if I've read that last one. I
she
haven't.
said that she said the second one was a little slower, and it was a different paced book. So I'm really interested to read that. But
I
she's
like
a
that
hoot,
her stuff takes place in different, like the first book was in Paris,
right?
and then the second book.
I think she said it was New Hampshire, right? Or it was a it was a small town book. The third one's in
Anyway, she
Florida.
travels. She travels a lot. The character.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a really fun read. Couldn't recommend it enough. It was just what book I couldn't put down. In fact, when I like put it on Goodreads that I'd finish it, Goodreads was like, "Really? You just started it? Um, Error. This isn't. You can't have finished this already." And I'm just still poking through anthologies. Actually, this is a time where I just got so many books open. It's kind of crazy. I'm still poking in the dispatches, still working on the Doctor Who book. So I'm kind of picking around and reading a lot of different things. So,
What about Wendigo?
oh, I
You finished
finished
that?
that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Uh, I love hunting stories. I've never hunted in my life, never shot a gun, never killed anything, but man, I love hunting stories, and that one's great.
Hmm,
So,
that's interesting.
never fired a gun. I will someday. But I was actually, my wife said, like, well, look, if there's ever an apocalypse like scenario, and we might not have a gun, but if we pick one up, we're going to need to know how to fire it. And I thought, all right, there's a scenario that
The
I could see
apocalypse.
happening. Like the zombie, like every single story that's out there these days is some post-apocalyptic story. I'm gonna have to know how to use a gun because they're not going to train you. That's what I've seen in these post-apocalyptic stories. You don't like wake up after the end times and then have somebody come and teach you how to shoot a gun.
That's true.
Yeah, so I want to be prepared.
Hey, there's a resource that I just discovered yesterday that I wanted to share, but I can't I haven't fully gone through and looked at it, but it just looks
Ooh,
really cool. And so I wanted to put a plug in for this YouTube show called Friends and Fiction. That's the name of the YouTube channel, Friends and Fiction. And it's for best-selling authors. And they just talk about stories and they interview other authors. And so um, it's a show for both writers and readers, which I thought was really interesting. So every Wednesday night they have a live show, and then they also have a playlist of writing tips, really short writing tips. I think that comes out weekly too.
that's
So
cool.
yeah,
Well,
it
there
just
goes
looks
my.
like a
I was gonna
what?
say I was thinking that could be my podcast, but now I'm not. Can't do that because someone's
Oh.
doing it already. Darn, darn. Sorry, Valerie. I thought we were onto something. All right. I love those podcasts. I just love people just talking about it, like we're doing right now.
Mhm. So let's talk about it. We're going to
Let's
talk
do it.
about marketing,
Yeah.
marketing from the ground up. What does that mean?
How do you start? Like, what do you do when you? There's a point for every author where they start like or writer or side hustle person where they like you get the inclination you want to do this, and but then where to start. And I think a lot of times when you're staring up at it, it's really easy to get that FOMO feeling, that like, oh my gosh, I haven't done any of it and now I have to do all of it. And I think it's really hard for a lot of people to conceive of a first step. And a lot of the advice I see that people get out there when if you're going to look at like Facebook groups, or I'm not knocking like things like, 20 books to 50K, or those kind of things, but those books are those sorts of sources are full of established people talking about what it means to be an established person, and it can really create like an unrealistic set of obstacles, I think. So I think it's important to talk about just like a marching order for what you're going to do, um, to start, like just how to do it.
Mhm.
And I think the first thing you have to do is just, you have to set out your real estate. Like what is going to be, like, what is your website going to be? Right. Knowing what it's going to be. If you're a fiction author, it's going to be a very simple, this is the, front page. This is who I am. Here's where you buy my books. Here's my blog. Those are the very simple things you need. The other things that come later, let's say you become a podcaster, let's say you become a booktuber, um, whatever you choose to do to support your author brand, that can all come later. But the basics are that 3-page website that you're creating, that is entirely your own. If you're a nonfiction author, it's very similar as well. I think you probably have more of an onus on you as a nonfiction author to create a blog that is going to bring readers to your subject, to you through your subject, and where you develop your expertise. So I think that's where it starts. That sort of like marketing from the ground up to me is like build your house, get the website together right from the start. I think when you're conceiving of building that website, like, okay, well, now that I have this thing and I'm going to start blogging, how do I do this? That's a separate task for each author. Like if you're a nonfiction author, you've got, well, if you're a fiction author, I think you're blogging on topics that are interest to you and interest to your market. Like what do readers of science fiction want to read about? Maybe this is where you review books. Maybe this is where you talk about movies. I've seen a lot of authors do things like they just grab onto the latest series and like TV series, and they do like response videos or response blogs to whatever's out there, because that brings people to you, right? Because the idea is then I'm writing this thing about The Mandalorian, which is new science fiction, and people who are into science fiction watch The Mandalorian. They'll read my blog. At the bottom of my blog, there's a link to my books. So finding sort of like knowing your market and like building your site around what that market likes is key. For nonfiction authors, and we were talking about this before pressing record, you have a sort of separate but easier task in marketing, and that is if you are a nonfiction author and you write around a particular topic, I mean, let's just like, what could we name as a topic? Let's say you're a nonfiction author and you write about
gardening.
I don't know, gardening, right? Perfect.
Pruning roses.
Right. Let's say you want to establish yourself as this expert rose person, rose cultivator. Rose cultivator sounds like a gardening robot, doesn't it? Like from the future, rose cultivator.
They probably make one.
Right. Someone is right now, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are making the rose cultivator 3000. I think that at that point you are looking for, and this is where you get into the more technical things, and you can do this as a fiction author as well, but this is where you get into things like keywords, and you start to look at, okay, you look at Google through using something like Keyword Planner or Google Analytics or whatever your keyword tool of choice is, and there are many. What do people who search on Google search for? Like, what do they actually look for that's adjacent to my topic? So, for example, you can go into Google Keyword Planner and enter rose bush cultivation, and Google Keyword Planner will give you, I mean, it could be a dozen, it could be 100 potential keywords that people are actively looking for to in that topic, right? So you want to make sure that as you're building from the ground up, you're planning a series of blogs or a series of content. I mean, we shouldn't limit it to blogs. Some people start right out with that video or that podcast, but you want to build a content plan based on what those fertile keywords are. And I use fertile like sort of as a pun, but there are keywords that are available that are easy to be that have easy searchability, and there's ones that are hard. And so you build a keyword strategy based on what's out there. And Google Keyword Planner gives you a ton of data. You can look and see how often something is searched and how often it's not. So you build that strategy. And for me, what I do as a business person is I do this like probably every 2 months. I sit down with Keyword Planner and just map out the next, 8 to 10 blogs that I'm going to write. And I come up with those subjects by keyword. And I'll see, oh, like right now, I think we talked about this last time. Like AI research, AI writing is a huge, huge topic. People are talking about it. So I decided it would only benefit me to create content based on AI, about AI writing and what I feel about it, because people are looking for it. Because all of that searchability is marketing that you own. When you create a blog on your site, it resides on your site. As long as you're paying for the upkeep of that site, it's yours. And as long as traffic is coming through that blog, which is a very realistic outcome for creating a blog, is that people will search for it, search for the topic, find your blog, interact with it, and hire you. You own it forever, right? Make sure you pay for the hosting on your website, and make sure you pay for the domain and all that. But that's a seed that you plant. I'm going to stay in the cultivation and gardening, sort of metaphor for as long as we can. Like that's a seed you plant that you own. The advertising you do is what is kind of next stage further up that, like from the ground up. That stuff you don't own. That's all fleeting. I run ads. When I turn those ads off, the traffic goes away. The traffic that remains is the traffic that comes through organically. So I think there's a lot of ways to sort of game the system. It's true. You can really sort of jumpstart a website. You can jumpstart a property that you own. But the key is, and I think every SEO or every sort of marketing planner would say, the more organic, like long tail evergreen content that you create, the better the health for your website is going to be, or your properties, right? It's the same thing even in social media, where you create something, and like sometimes there are posts that people create that have long-term, people will look at it for more than just the immediate few days after it's posted. So I think there's a lot of strategy that goes on early in that process, but that's the ground up. Like that is, I think, to me, is like knowing the market, figuring out what the market wants out of what you're creating, and then just building from there in a realm that you own.
So I wanted to go back. Can you repeat or paraphrase what you said about the more organic and long tail the content is, the healthier your space
Yeah.
is?
Yeah. So,
Can you say that
well,
again?
in a different way.
I was trying to type it and I didn't
Oh,
catch
okay.
all the words, so I just wanted to make sure I was understanding correctly.
Right. So organic content is stuff that's on your site and that's originally created by you. And the intent of it is to organically drive traffic towards it. Organic means um, there's no ads running to it. So you're looking for content that's, first off, organic, that has interest. Long tail is like, it's specific, right? So if you're in that rose cultivating business and you want to, like, you can do rose cultivation, and that's a very big, I'm sure, a very big term. But if you want to be, you could say rose cultivation in the Pacific Northwest. Now that's a long tail keyword. You've really defined the market for that blog, because the person is interested in cultivating roses and they're in the Pacific Northwest. You've now really honed in on an audience right there. And long tail is just specific. You need to build the basic keywords. On your site, when you're planning it, you would need to have something that's basic, like rose cultivation basics or something like that. That might be a very competitive keyword, but you also want to get into the more specific things, because if you are planting a rose garden in the Pacific Northwest and you're searching for help, you want to be found as that expert. So you want to be the expert in big things by being an expert in a lot of little things that support that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Um,
So
And
you've
the way
got
Google,
organic stuff, you've got long tail stuff, you've got evergreen stuff. So
and
those
by
are the,
evergreen just means it never goes out of style, right? It
yeah.
never, as long as people are planting roses in the Pacific Northwest, you're going to be relevant. So that keyword has the opportunity to build, that blog has an interest in building what's called authority over time. And that's something Google looks at. Like this person who has been writing about roses for 10 years has this very specific blog, and it's been relevant for 10 years. It recognizes that and gives that a lot more authority than something that maybe even a bigger website puts out, because it's like, well, this has been around a really long time and people have been using it. So let's, the other
So
part, the
here,
other thing, I use it. Did I say, I said evergreen? Okay.
mhm.
Evergreen just means it's always relevant. The example that I use, if you're going to blog about something like The Mandalorian, like a TV show that's coming out as a fiction author, you are kind of rolling the dice on something that isn't, I mean, people are probably always going to be reading and talking about that show because it's a Star Wars property and people are super into Star Wars. But there is going to be a steep drop off in something topical because it'll be out of the news. There'll be a new Star Wars something. And so you can play that game and it works, but it's a secondary strategy. Anyway, go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to ask now.
So I
Never
think
mind.
I primary strategy are the big evergreen things. So if you are that science fiction author and you're writing about, you want to establish yourself as a voice in science fiction through your website, you probably want to start with like the bigger things, like, you know, best science fiction books or best science fiction characters, best science fiction endings. Like those are bigger topics. Once you've established yourself with bigger topics, this is ground up. Now you have you smaller blocks. You know, now you can say, okay, I'm going to talk about the Mandalorian, and I'm going to talk about the republishing of these books, and you know, like, and you start building up like that. All of it supports. I mean, everything supports it's sort of a bigger structure that supports itself. Like if you have the bigger blocks underneath, they create authority for the smaller blocks on top, which create authority for the smaller blocks on top, and it starts to feed it. And it is a numbers game, a lot of what you're when you're marketing anything. And all of the algorithms, whether it's Facebook or Amazon or Google, all of those reward longevity. So you have to be in the game for a while. They all reward amount of content. I mean, if you put out one book, you're one book, but then if you put out 10, Amazon suddenly recognizes, okay, you're an establishing author. This is that put a focus on you. Um,
So what about so this podcast? We've got 110 podcast episodes. That's a lot of content. This is
it's
a
a ton.
weekly show,
Yeah.
but it's video,
Right.
it's audio. I don't have transcripts up. I've played with it a couple of times. Some of the episodes are transcripted. Most of them are not. How does SEO work for that? Does that even count
It
for
absolutely does.
content?
It absolutely does. And so one of the things that every SEO person I've ever worked with has ever said, they say the same thing. It's like Google rewards video content. And the reason for that is that Google owns YouTube, right? It's like they're like hand in glove. So naturally, Google wants to push content that's posted on YouTube to the top of the video search algorithm over other video providers. And there's other video, you know, there's Vimeo, and then there's just other places people can post videos like native on their site. So if this were like if I were posting this on a site, like it's essentially everything is sort of a page or everything fits the same SEO standard. So every one of these blogs you would post on a site, or sorry, every one of these video podcasts I would post on an individual blog page categorized as, you know, podcast. And
Instead of on YouTube?
well, you post it on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you create a page on YouTube. YouTube is a search engine as well.
Right.
So all of that metadata. And so metadata is all the data that you put into the description, the hashtags, so when I post a video for, like when I post one of the explainer videos for one of my stories, I always just hashtag. I put like 300, 400 words in that description, and it's usually, focusing on Oregon author, paranormal mystery, or, Patreon. Like those are keywords that someone is searching for. And I put those in that description, and those become, and you make sure that the description of the video is using a keyword, right? So this would be author marketing author marketing would be a keyword. And I would just sprinkle that throughout the video description, because someone searching for author marketing will eventually land on this. So what you do then is now you have your YouTube video, and when you create a blog based on that YouTube video, you embed the YouTube video in the blog, and then you do the same thing. You title the blog with SEO rich terminology. You build the text around the video in an SEO rich language, and you post it. If you have two blogs side by side on the same site, right? One of them is author marketing, and it's 600 words of you talking about it, and the other one is 300 words and a video. There's a lot of SEO experts would say Google's going to prioritize the one with the video, because that video is like, it connects to another property, which it likes. And also people really go for video, right? They love it. So the more you can support your written content with video, the better.
So my blog, we're getting into the weeds here. My blog on my author services website is the embedded audio player for this podcast episode. So should I also be putting in the YouTube video?
Yes. For every one of those blogs I would just kind of do like a sandwich, right? Top of that would be the video, and then I would have 300 to 400 words description of what it is, like what you're talking about. Hey, this week Eric and I are going to talk about this, and this is what 300 words is probably on Yoast, which analyzes your site for SEO health. It will tell you 300 words is about the minimum you can put down. So I would do the video, the 300 words, and then I'd put a link to the audio on the bottom. And that's because priority wise, video is more searchable than audio at this point. I don't know. I'm sure there's somebody out there who could better speak to how to use an audio feed in a blog, but video is such a huge driver of traffic. In fact, there's a lot of people that think that YouTube could become the number one search engine in the world over Google, that it's possible. Because like when people want to know how to do something, they go to YouTube. They say, well, how do I tie a fish hook? Well, they go to YouTube and find a video of somebody doing it. So I think it's becoming more and more important that you have that, because one of the things Google also likes is that it when you have a diverse way of showing of delivering content, it kind of is like an ADA thing. Like it is for someone who is, who doesn't read well, right? They like that video. That video is going to be where they go for answers. There's a lot of things that things have to fit all like learning capabilities on Google. They like that. So offering that, maybe someone's visually impaired and they want to find your the podcast, just the audio version. So having all that stuff together is just a package that reaches all of your potential readers. Cool. And I know we're going, there's no way to get out of the weeds on these topics, because it's so, I just laid out what I think is a pretty succinct, if I were starting over, this is exactly what I would do. But then it's hard not to think of specific instances. I mean, there's people who use Facebook, their Facebook author page as their website. I'm sure we've heard of that. We know that some of those people, there's people who, only use social media. There's people who don't blog. They only do video. The trouble with those things is that you don't own that. Again, like Facebook, the government could shut Facebook down because they think it's there's people talking about shutting TikTok down. If your whole business was centered on a TikTok feed and all of a sudden the government decided to shut down TikTok, you're out. That's what you're trying to avoid, is having anyone else control your servability, what you're serving your customers. And that's the other part of it. Marketing from the ground up is essentially a content strategy for reaching potential customers. You're building an authority for who you are to sell a book, whether it's a class, a service, a product. You're building that authority with that reader. I have a colleague who struggles with this, and she will say things like, well, why would I write about this if it's not what I, like we had this debate about the AI topic. She says, well, why would you write about AI writing if you are actually worried about AI writing taking over your business? And I said, well, I want the people now I want people to know what I feel about it. And if people are going to be searching for anything around what I do, I want them to know, like, here's what I think about it. Here's where I think it's good. And here's where I think it's bad. And here's what it can do for you. And here's what it can't. Like, you have to be out front of topics. But it's all in the interest of, it's in the interest of having a message and sharing it, but it's also in the interest of convincing that potential customer that you're the person, right? If you have a $500 author coaching service, those 5 blogs where you talk about those things is what helps them make that decision to hire you. So you're writing to a reader, a customer, but you're also doing it in a way that that convinces the Google robot to find you. And there's an art to it. If you read the best blogs that you read on any topic are practiced in that art. If you Googled something and you read an article and you say, wow, this is great, I'm going to keep reading this, you've just given yourself an example of what works. Google showed it to you because you were interested in it and you read it and it converted your interest. So it worked for both. So I think that's a great way to learn how to write that baseline content is just go see what worked on you and then learn that craft of that writing right there.
Cool. And then if we're talking about a fiction author, we have to, I guess we're all authors. So in addition to this marketing from the ground up, we have to save space for actually writing our books too. And they do say the best marketing is to write the next book.
That's what they say.
That's what they say.
Well,
I think grimaced there. What do you think about that?
Which part? The
grimaced. The best marketing you can do is to write the next book.
Well, I think I grimace when I hear that because the book is, the book takes a lot of time and the book takes a lot of cultivation and there's a lot that goes into it. And it feels like if you're banking all of your marketing on something you do twice a year or once a year, then that's going to be hard. So I do agree with that because every time you put something out, you remind your reader that you're there. You remind your reader that your story is still alive and that your character is still, fighting the Boston mob or searching for the truth about paranormal mysteries in his hometown. You're reminding your reader that you're there. But
and that you have all these other books too.
Right. But if you think about it from the reader's point of view, right? If let's say I'm a big fan of, I'm just going to use Valerie Brooks. I'm sure she wouldn't mind, right? If I was a big fan, and I am a big fan of Valerie Brooks, I'm just going to say it. If the only thing Valerie is putting out there to me is I have a new book, 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 that becomes, there's not a lot of fans that hang in for that, right? The readers at this point have the option of they have a lot of options. And I think when you're just giving people the sale pitch, then, they may go somewhere else. So I've seen people do things like, God, there's like a million ways that Valerie, I've seen her already just putting her stuff out there. She's posted pictures of the locations that some of those books are in. So like the Paris location, it's a huge inspiration in her series and her book. I just saw on social media, she's posting pictures of like all the big ornate roofs and cathedrals and things in Paris. Well, if you're interested in Paris and you're interested in her, this is just a little bit of content that keeps you going. It keeps you reminded that she's there. And there's this in marketing, this is probably the wrong thing to say 5 minutes before the end of a podcast. But one of the principles of marketing is the 5-to-1 principle, right? It's you give people 5 things that they can use for every 1 sales pitch that you give them. So most really successful content marketers, which is what authors are doing, are putting out, hey, like, let's say you write historical, God, Margaret Pennard, she's a Portland author, right?
Yeah.
She writes like Scottish, like that
historical.
sort of historical like she's always posting pictures of Scotland and the costumes that her characters would wear, the clothes that her characters would wear that are, she's posting that stuff. And again, if you're interested in the period and you're interested in, she posts a lot of romance stuff because there's a romantic element there. So she's giving her readers who are interested in all that stuff little bits of what they're into. And then I don't know how strategic she is, but in there somewhere is a sales pitch, and that's probably about every 5 or 6 blogs or every 5 or 6 posts that, hey, you love those roofs and you love those clothes and those really cool pictures of Scotland. All of that is in these books. And that, again, the sales pitch comes in there somewhere, reminding them that you have the books is all of what you're doing. It's just you have to
balance it out.
You got to balance it. And I think that has something to, like, even if you're running the author side hustle kind of thing, if you're marketing a coaching service, or if you're marketing I'm a ghostwriter service, it's not a constant sales pitch. You have to develop a sort of a voice, know your reader, know your customer, and talk to them about everything around that thing until you want them to buy.
Right.
I've seen a lot of authors just like throwing the book cover out there, and it like they just put the book cover out on a daily basis and just say,
it gets boring after a while, and
right,
people are busy and they want to read good content if it's relevant to them and what they want to know about or be entertained by. But yeah, it becomes almost what's the word I'm looking for? Like
self-defeating.
Well, it's insulting, I think, to the reader to be like, okay, I get that you have a book. Cool.
Right.
I've known about it for a while. I've already bought it, or I'm not ready to buy it yet, but I want to, or it's not my thing, but I still like you as an author, or I like this series, but not this one. So I'm hanging in there because I like it when you write these other series books. But
Right.
So yeah, having some other things in there to like be helpful or be entertaining. I think
Right.
that's kind of our job too.
Realistically, there's very few books, very few of your customers are going to buy it because it's you and you just put it out. Like, that's your family, your friends, your close, your big fans. After a while, it's the art of the sale. It's how you get in there and just sort of finesse it in a way that, and it's, look, I had a hard time with this in the beginning because I felt like, well, the world is already flooded with stuff. Why do I need to add 5 posts a week or 5 blogs a month to just flood the world even more? But what you're doing is, the more content that, before, you just had to have a business and a listing in the yellow pages, and that gave you authority. right? And if your business began with an A, you were at the top of the listings in the yellow pages and people called you first. That's why everything is AAA, AAA home repair.
A and B rental
Now,
services.
right. Oh God, there's so many AAA things. But how many, like now with so much stuff out there, it's about building, you have to build authority, right? There's just genuine authority because people know they have options. And there's a ton out there. And that authority comes from being you, being genuine, and putting it out there on in a way that your reader, your customer is into.
And I do want to close with reiterating what you just said there. Be you, be genuine. When you're creating this content in the realm that you own, do it in a way that you enjoy, because then that's sustainable and you don't feel skeezy. You don't
Oh
feel
yeah,
like,
great point.
you're just having to do this thing. It's on the to-do list. It's something that you enjoy, and do whatever you can to reframe it in a way that creates joy. And I can't wait to tell my readers about this new um, rose pruner I just bought, or
Right,
whatever,
right. Oh, there's somebody writing that blog today. Here's the 5 new rose pruners that are out there. Which one
Right.
do I like the best? And there are how many people out there who just broke their rose pruner and they're looking for one? It's April.
Right.
That this is your time. So if you don't, and I think what you said is so important, and I think this kind of like know your market is what we've been talking about, but like my last comment will be know yourself, right?
Hmm.
If you don't want to write about this thing a lot, then maybe it's not the thing you need to write about. Like
Hmm.
if it really cringes you out to write about that rose pruner because it seems stupid, maybe you shouldn't be in the rose cultivating business. It's not organic to you. And that reader's going to figure that out like right away. If you're not
Hmm.
loving it, you're not fooling anybody.
So be you, be genuine, and be self-sustaining.
And think about it in increments, right? You have to start somewhere. That's today. Do the basics and start building it. And hey, I'm still here. Call me or get in touch with me through the podcast. I'm always happy to talk about these things.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eric, for helping us with this marketing series. I really learned a whole bunch of stuff, and I feel like even though I've been doing this for years, I also need to start from the ground up and make sure that I'm optimizing all of those things to the best of my capability. And
That's the O word. Got to
I
optimize.
think going through it again and again is important, because our capabilities do change.
Yeah.
Today in 2023, these are the skills I have, and I'm going to do the list with the skills that I have. And in 4 years or next year or whatever, I'll do it again and just make sure that it's built up to the level of my capability at that time.
Right. And you'll find that there's like in the beginning, writing 10 blogs is going to be daunting and it's going to take you, let's say it takes you 30 hours to write and post 10 blogs. But by the end of that, it's like I've got it down to like an hour. It takes me an hour to write and post something because I've got a system. I know that voice. That opens you up. If you've committed that kind of time to doing things, you now have a little extra time. Maybe your skills, like you're saying, like maybe now is the time to start thinking about that video blog or that other thing you can add to it. Just get good at the basics first and see what follows.
Right on. All right. Thanks so much. See you next
Oh,
time.
that was my pleasure. See you next week.
Bye for now.